morning, fairy tale lovers of the interwebs. I'm Alexa, the resident ookie spooky girly, and today we're chatting about one of my absolute favorite things, dark fairy tales. I hope y'all are ready, because welcome to the top 5 terrifying German bedtime stories that will give you nightmares. Number 5, The Goose Girl. This one was a personal favorite story when I was younger, and the first one that jumped into my head today when I was thinking of tales that might be a little more warped, if you will. So this tale was first published by the Brothers Grimm in the first edition of their second volume of tales back in 1815 as number 3. The tale begins when a widowed queen sends her daughter to a faraway land to marry. Accompanying the princess are her magical horse Falada, who can speak, and a maid. So the queen gives the princess a special charm that will protect her as long as she wears it. The princess and her servant travel for a time, and eventually the princess grows thirsty, as one does on a trip, and asks her maid to get her water. And the maid told her, well, do it herself. At the creek the girl wailed, "What will become of me?" And the charm answered, "Alas, if your mother knew, her loving heart would break in two." So we go on our trip, and after a while the princess gets thirsty again, and asked her maid the same thing. The evil maid replied, "I will not serve you any longer, no matter what you or your mother say." While grabbing water, the poor princess loses her charm, and with it, her mother's protection. The maid takes advantage of the princess and orders her to change clothes and horses, threatening to kill the princess if she tells anyone the truth. At the palace, the maid poses as the princess, and the princess servant is ordered to guard the geese with a boy named Conrad. Now the false bride orders Falada to be killed, but the real princess finds out and begs for Falada's head to be nailed above the doorway, where she passes with her geese every morning. So the next morning, the goose girl addresses the head over the doorway, going, "Falada, Falada, thou art dead, and all the joy of my life has fled." And Falada answers, "Alas, alas, if your mother knew, her loving heart would break in two." During their chores, Conrad watches the princess comb her beautiful hair, and for some reason wants to steal some of it. But the goose girl says a charm. "Blow and blow, I say, take Conrad's hat away. Do not let him come back today until my hair is combed." And so the wind obeyed her wishes. I wish I had that power. Conrad complained to the king and declared that he will not herd geese with her because of the weird magic. The king tells him to do it one more time, and the next morning hides and sees the events for himself. That evening he asks the princess to tell him the story, but she refuses to say anything because of her oath. The king suggests that she might tell everything to the iron stove, and when he leaves the room, she does, sobbing the entire time. As the king is convinced that she has told the truth, he has the goose girl clad in royal clothes, and then tricks the false princess into choosing her own punishment. So while the choice is different in each version of the story, in the classic version, she tells the king that a false servant should be dragged through the town nude in a barrel with internal spikes. As a result, she is punished that way until she dies, and the prince and princess live happily ever after. Number 4, The Dog and the Sparrow. A sheepdog had an owner that let him go hungry, and while he was venturing out for somewhere better, he met a sparrow, and the duo struck up a friendship. Upon learning the dog was hungry, the sparrow helped him acquire food from a few different vendors until the dog was positive he was satisfied and curled up for a nap, while the sparrow perched on a branch above. While he lay sleeping there, a wagoner came driving by. He had a cart with 3 horses and 2 barrels of wine. Now the sparrow saw that he was going to drive right over the dog and cried out, "Wagoner, don't do it, or I will bring you to poverty." The wagoner, however, growled to himself, "Yeah, not gonna happen." He cracked his whip and drove the cart over the dog, and sadly the wheels ended him. The sparrow cried though, "You have run over my brother dog and killed him. It will cost you your cart and your horses." Now the wagoner scoffed at the idea, but while he was gloating, the sparrow crept under the cover of the cart and pecked so long at the plug holding the wine in the barrel, all the wine ran out without the driver noticing it. Eventually, the driver saw that the cart was dripping and looked at the barrels and "Oh, whoops. Unfortunate fellow I am," he cried. "Not unfortunate enough yet," said the sparrow. He flew onto the head of one of the horses and plucked his eyes out. The driver drew out his axe and wanted to hit the sparrow, but the clever bird was able to dodge it, and instead the horse suffered the blow. "Oh, what an unfortunate man I am," he cried. "Not unfortunate enough yet," said the sparrow. When the driver drove on with the 2 horses, the sparrow pecked at the second cask, so now all the wine's gone. When the driver became aware of it, yeah, you know the exchange by now. The sparrow seated himself on the head of the second horse and pecked his eyes out. The driver ran up to it, raised the axe to strike, but yeah, this horse met the same fate as the first one, sadly. The entire exchange happened again with the third horse, but this time the sparrow vowed to make the man unfortunate at home and flew away. The driver had to leave the wagon standing, but when he got home, he started venting to his wife, and she cut him off, exclaiming that not only had the sparrow beaten him home, but he found thousands of friends and they had eaten up all the family's corn. This time, he told the man he would cost him his life, and the wagoner snatched the axe and threw it at the sparrow, but it only broke the window. Didn't hit the bird. Lucky bird. He chased the bird throughout the house, using his axe to destroy a lot, and finally caught the bird in his hand. His wife offered to end the bird herself, but the man instead, swallowed it whole. Well, the sparrow began to flutter about in his body, and fluttered up again into the man's mouth. Then it stretched out its head, cried, "Wagoner, it shall still cost you your life." The driver gave the axe to his wife and said, "Take care of it." The woman struck, but Mr. Blow hit the wagoner right on his head, and that's the end of him. And the sparrow, well, it flew up up and away. Number 3, Sleeping Beauty. A king and queen welcome the birth of their daughter, and at her christening, she is betrothed to a prince to unite their kingdoms. You know, as one did, and still does with royalty. Among the guests are the 3 good fairies, whose giving of gifts is interrupted by the evil fairy. As revenge for not being invited, she curses the princess, proclaiming that before the sun sets on her 16th birthday, she will prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel and, well, die. The king orders all spinning wheels throughout the kingdom to be burned as a precaution, while the fairy trio whisks the princess off to a forest cottage for safety until her 16th birthday. On that very day, our princess meets the prince without knowing who he is, and they immediately fall in love with each other, to the point where she invites him to visit her at home. Meanwhile, the good fairies are arguing while using magic and attract the attention of the bad fairy, who learns where the princess is. Returning home, the princess's guardians finally reveal to her that, she is a princess, already betrothed to a prince, so this guy can't happen, and take her back to the castle. The evil fairy appears and lures our princess away from the fairies to a tower room, where our lovely princess pricks her finger on a spindle and, whoopsie. Now the fairies cast a spell on all the people in the castle and the town, causing them to sleep until the princess awakens. The good fairies find out that the prince and the man who, the princess has fallen in love with are one and the same, but he's already been, kidnapped by the evil fairy and her goons at that point. The good fairies rescue the prince, and he defeats the evil fairy. With her gone, he awakens our princess with a kiss, breaking the spell and waking the kingdom. Now, this version of the fairy tale is actually cleaned out from earlier version, where the prince returns to find the young woman lying in a bedchamber, nude and comatose, and can't resist the urge to have intercourse with her. She becomes pregnant and gives birth, all while remaining asleep. But her spawn bites her finger, mistaking it for a breast, causing the flax chip from the spindle to fall out, and then she wakes up. If we're talking about nightmare fuel, in another version, in the 1634 version to be exact, it's a king who impregnates a sleeping maiden, who gives birth to twins. When his queen finds out, she sends her cook to the offspring to kill and cook them, and serve them to her wayward husband as punishment. Fortunately, the cook can't bring himself to do it and serves lamb instead. Number 2, the Pied Piper. The town of Hamlin was suffering from a rat infestation, and a piper dressed in multicolored, or pied clothing, appeared, claiming to be a rat catcher. He promised the mayor a solution to their problem, with the rats, and the mayor in turn promised to pay him 1,000 guilders for the removal of said rats. The piper accepted and played his pipe to lure the rats into the river, where they all drowned. Now, despite his success, the mayor went back on his promise and refused to pay him the full sum, offering now only 50, which is a total ripoff, even going so far as to blame the piper for bringing the rats in himself in an extortion attempt. Enraged, the piper stormed out of town, vowing to return later to take revenge. On St. John and Paul's Day, the piper returned, playing his pipe and attracting the young ones out of the town. 130 followed him into a cave, after which they were never seen again. Depending on the version, at most 3 little ones remained behind due to different reasons, and informed the villagers of what had just happened. In other versions though, he made them walk into the river, kinda like with the rats, and that's all folks. Number 1, the 12 brothers. So once upon a time there was a king and a queen who had 12 offspring, all boys. One day the king said to his wife, if she gives birth to a girl next, the other boys must die, so that her possessions may be great and the kingdom may fall to her alone. He ordered 12 coffins to be made, had them locked up in a room to keep it a secret, and gave a key only to his wife, who he swore to secrecy. So at some point, her youngest son, who was always with her, named Benjamin by the way, asked why she was so sad. Originally she tried to dodge the question, but Benjamin persisted until she showed him the room with the coffins and told him the truth. Benjamin promised that if it came to it, he and his brothers would be safe. He and his mom set up a system. The boys would hide in the forest, taking turns keeping watch. If she gave birth to a son, she'd wave a white flag to let them know they could return safely, but if she raised a red one, they'd have to run away. So the boys did as such, venturing deep into the forest and keeping an eye on each other and waiting for the signal. As I'm sure you can guess, the fateful day came and sadly, red flag was raised. So the boys ventured deep into the forest, finding a little bewitched hut and stayed there for about 10 years. Tiny little hiccup though, because of their hatred of the entire affair. They vowed that every maiden they would ever meet, they would end her life. Anyways, back at the castle, as the daughter grew up, she grew into a good and curious person. One day, when all the clothes were being washed, she saw 12 men's shirts among the things, and asked her mom, to whom do these 12 shirts belong? For they are too small for father. And so, the heartbroken queen told the little princess the entire tale, complete with showing her the coffins. The determined young girl then took the 12 shirts, vowing to find her brothers. She ventured deep into the forest, eventually finding the hut and running into Benjamin, who was in charge of keeping house while the older brothers hunted. Somebody's gotta do it. He asked her, where are you from and where are you going? The young princess answered, well, I am a king's daughter, and I am seeking my 12 brothers. I will walk as far as the sky is blue until I find them. She showed him the 12 shirts, and once he realized she was his younger sister, he told her who he was, and the two embraced and wept for joy. But remember that little vow to kill? Thankfully, Benjamin was a reasonable person and hid his sister until after his brothers got home. And after he told them the entire story, she emerged and happiness was had all around. The following day, she stayed at home with Benjamin and helped him work. The bewitched house had a little garden where 12 lily flowers flowers grew, called students. The sister wished to give her brothers pleasure and, plucked the 12 flowers, but at the same moment she plucked the flowers, the 12 brothers were changed into 12 ravens and flew off. Oh, and the entire house and garden vanished as well. When the princess looked around, an old woman was standing near her who said, "My child, what have you done? Why did you not leave the 12 white flowers alone? They were your brothers, who are now forevermore changed into ravens." The girl said, weeping, "Is there no way of delivering them?" "No," said the old woman. "Well, there is a way, but it is so difficult that you will not deliver them by it. You must be silent for 7 years, not speaking, not laughing. If you speak a single word, even in the last hour of the 7 years, all will be for nothing and your brothers will be killed by that one word." The sister sat in isolation for quite some time, until one day a king from a neighboring kingdom was hunting in the forest and came across the beautiful young woman. He was so charmed with her beauty that he called to ask her if she would be his wife. She made no answer, saying nothing, but nodded a little with her head, and he carried her home. The wedding was magnificent and full of happiness. The bride neither spoke nor smiled. When they had lived happily together for a few years, the king's mother, who was a very wicked woman, began to slander the young queen. At first the king wouldn't believe it, but eventually he sadly gave in and sentenced her to death. When she was bound to the stake and the fire was looking at her clothes, the last minute of the 7 years expired. 12 ravens came flying towards the stake and turned back into her brothers. They tore the fire apart, extinguished the flames, and set their sister free. She was finally able to talk, and after explaining everything to her husband, everyone lived happily ever after. Okay, well, not all. The wicked stepmother was put into a barrel filled with boiling oil and venomous snakes and died an evil death, as she should. And that brings us to the end of our time, and I hope y'all loved today enough for part 2 because I have so many more stories. I'm a bit of a fairy tale expert. If you enjoyed my ramblings, could you help us out by giving this video a like, hit the bell for more terrifying content from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.